The sight hit me like a punch to the gut. My city-issued black sedan was gone. Not moved. Not misplaced. Just gone. In its place sat a lonely oil stain and a neon pink slip taped to my mailbox that read, "Vehicle removed for HOA violation. Aesthetic disruption per 3.2c." I stood there, still in my uniform, badge clipped to my belt, blinking at the paper like it might morph into something sane. The kicker? I had parked it in my own driveway. My private, paid-for, fully permitted driveway. And the woman behind it all was already sipping a mimosa on her porch like she hadn't just declared war. Karen Whitaker, the self-declared queen of this HOA kingdom, had crossed a line. And what she didn't know, what she couldn't even begin to imagine, was that the man she just messed with was the director of citywide parking enforcement. I didn't just know the law. I wrote half the rules she thought she was quoting. And now, her smug little empire was about to crumble. It had all started earlier that morning. I just returned home from a long night dealing with a citywide sweep on unauthorized tow operators. I was looking forward to a hot shower, a warm omelet, and maybe even a nap on the porch. Instead, I got a ghost driveway and a migraine. I paced in circles, checked the garage, checked the neighbor's ring cam, and even double-checked with my department to make sure I hadn't left the car at work. It wasn't there. But what made no sense was the total lack of notice. If my car had been legally towed, there should have been city paperwork. A record. A phone call. Anything. That's when I saw the pink slip with Karen's name on it. Actually, her full signature scrawled like a kindergartner's art project. She had unilaterally decided that my sedan, the one with the government plate, was offensive to the community's visual experience. I marched right over. Karen was on her porch in full power trip attire. Leopard print blouse, oversized sunglasses, and a clipboard in hand like she was auditioning for a reality show no one asked for. She smiled without teeth and waved as if I were a door-to-door salesman. "Oh, hello, Marcus," she cooed, not even bothering to hide the condescension. "I was hoping you'd understand. That car really disrupts the vibe. HOA standards are very clear about non-conforming visual elements." I glanced over at her husband's rust-colored RV parked diagonally across their lawn like a dying whale and held my tongue. She wasn't quoting policy. She was fabricating her own version of it. I asked for the tow report. She handed me a one-page Word document with clip art and a fake Eagle Enforcement logo printed in low-res. The listed towing number didn't even work. That's when it clicked. She hadn't called the city. She'd called someone else. Someone private. Karen twirled her mimosa and added, "Don't worry. Your car's safe. It's just at a holding lot. I'm sure they'll waive the fees for you." I stared at her, silent. I had seen hundreds of shady tow setups in my time. Private enforcement companies run by cousins, nephews, or friends of HOA board members, hired off the books, no accountability, no oversight. And now it was happening on my block. To me. And this woman had no idea I was the guy responsible for regulating every legal tow truck in the city limit. I thanked her with a grin so fake it could have been plastic and walked back home without another word. I got on the phone with the city's towing database and confirmed what I already suspected. No record. My plate had not been flagged or logged by any certified towing company. That made this tow completely unauthorized, maybe even criminal. I dug deeper. I pulled up the name of every towing company operating within 5 miles of my address. Only one wasn't registered in the database: Eagle Enforcement. A shady pop-up with no insurance, no permits, and no listed address. A company that shouldn't exist. And yet, they had my government vehicle. I made a few more calls. First to Officer Prentice at the Impound Regulation Unit, then to Marla in Legal, and finally to my own assistant, Sheila, who practically sprinted over with a folder of HOA regulatory bylaws and a look of disbelief. "She towed your city car from your driveway?" she asked, stunned. I nodded. "Oh, she's cooked. Well done. Extra crispy." Sheila opened the folder like she was slicing a cake. "Here's the fun part. This HOA has never filed their updated restrictions with our compliance board, which means any action taken under new guidelines is invalid. I smiled. Karen hadn't just towed my car, she'd built her case on sand. And it was already crumbling. But before striking back, I needed proof. So I set up surveillance. My neighbor, Tim, let me hook a high-angle camera to his gutter facing the tow zone. I embedded a GPS tag in my replacement city car, just in case she tried it again. I even dropped a tracking air tag under my driveway planter. And then I waited. It didn't take long. 2 days later, Karen struck again. Only this time, she'd instructed her private enforcement partner to block off part of the street and slap pink tickets on any car parked off-axis, including a mother's minivan and a landscaper's trailer. The tow truck circled like a shark, targeting the most vulnerable. But they didn't see the unmarked city vehicle following them. They didn't hear the police scanner in the glove box. And they certainly didn't recognize the undercover municipal inspector sitting in the passenger seat, sipping a latte with a GoPro in his lap. The truck pulled into a hidden lot behind a broken-down warehouse at the edge of the city, exactly where I suspected. We documented everything. The illegal entries, the unlisted fee structure, the lack of posted signage, and perhaps the biggest win of all, a signed contract between Karen Whitaker and Eagle Enforcement, complete with payment schedules, preferred target zones, and photos of cars to be prioritized for towing. My sedan was right there in the corner, tires slashed, paint keyed, and windshield cracked. What started as a petty HOA power play had now crossed into destruction of government property and conspiracy. Back at home, Karen was gloating to anyone who'd listen. She'd posted a photo of my empty driveway on the neighborhood group chat with the caption, "Some people finally learning about community standards." The comments were half cheers, half confusion, but none of them knew what was coming next. I replied only with a picture of my badge. The next morning, she woke up to city officials parked on her lawn. 3 departments: code enforcement, towing compliance, city legal. We had warrants, paperwork, and a long, long list of violations. Her mimosa shattered on the ground when she opened the door. And that was just the beginning. Karen's downfall didn't begin with the officials on her lawn. No, that was merely the opening number. The real performance began when she tried to act like nothing had happened. That very evening, she hosted a wine and cheese mixer for the HOA board members and a few new homeowners who were too polite, or too intimidated, to question her authority. She smiled like she hadn't just triggered a city investigation. Her porch lights were strung with gold tinsel, her playlist was all soft jazz, and her voice carried across the yard as she told anyone who would listen that her beautification initiative was just a taste of her vision for the neighborhood. I stood on my porch across the street, arms folded, watching the circus unfold with the kind of calm you get when you already know how the final act ends. Karen was treating this neighborhood like her personal Sims game, rearranging people and property as she pleased. But the difference between a game and reality is that in reality, someone always keeps the receipt. And I had them all. The next morning, she escalated. Not content with the warning she'd already received from city enforcement, she launched what I would later call the cone crusade. I walked out of my front door to find a row of construction cones stretched across the mouth of my driveway like a plastic orange picket line. A sign had been placed dead center. Parking temporarily restricted due to aesthetic violation under HOA review. There was no such rule in our charter, no clause that allowed a private citizen, especially not one under investigation, to block another homeowner's driveway. And yet, there it stood, daring me to react. I picked up one of the cones and rolled it in my hand. It was brand new, heavy-duty, and still had a price tag from a bulk supplier that catered to construction crews, not neighborhood HOA board. She had bought these in bulk. She planned this. It wasn't just my driveway. 2 other homes had cones along the curb, both of them occupied by neighbors who'd questioned Karen's towing policy the week prior. One of them, a single mom named Jenna, had even received a phony warning letter about her mailbox being a shade too beige for neighborhood harmony. The HOA wasn't a homeowners association anymore. It was a dictatorship dressed in khaki and pearls. I wasn't surprised when I received an email that evening titled HOA Urgent Community Revisions. It was a PDF attachment filled with laughable rules. All cars must be less than 5 years old, no vehicle may remain visible from the street for more than 2 hours, and my personal favorite, car color must complement the natural surroundings. I could have just ignored it, but that's not how change happens. That's not how you stop people like Karen. So I printed the entire document, red-penned it like a furious English teacher, and walked it straight into the monthly HOA meeting, which Karen had moved to the clubhouse instead of our usual Zoom link. She said it was to preserve transparency, but I knew it was to intimidate. The room was filled with folding chairs, poorly made coffee, and exactly one person wearing a shirt that said HOA Life in rhinestones. Karen took center stage like she was hosting a TED Talk, flipping through her PowerPoint with mock sincerity. I waited until she reached the slide titled Enforcing Vision Standards, where a heavily photoshopped image of a luxury car in front of a manicured lawn filled the screen. That's when I stood up. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even step forward. I just spoke from the back of the room and said, clearly and calmly, "Your rules are unenforceable, your toes are illegal, and your authority is under review by the city you think you're controlling." The room went silent. Karen blinked at me, her hand still on the clicker. Someone in the front actually dropped a pen. She tried to recover with a laugh. "Marcus, we've all heard about your little city job, but surely you understand that HOAs are private institutions." I pulled out my badge and placed it on the closest table. "Sure. But private institutions still have to follow public law. And when they don't, people like me show up." Karen sputtered. "Well, this is a private meeting. I'll ask you to leave if you're not going to participate respectfully." I smiled. "Respectfully? You installed traffic cones in front of my home and had my government-issued car towed by an unlicensed company. Respect went out the window with your credibility." She scrambled to shift the attention back to the meeting. "We'll proceed with the vote to ratify these revisions." I raised my hand again. "You can't vote on illegal proposals. That's not how governance works." A few members looked uneasy. One older gentleman muttered, "Maybe we should hold off until this is cleared up." Another neighbor, a woman I didn't know well, stood and said, "I didn't sign up for this drama. This isn't what the HOA is supposed to be." Karen's smile strained. She clearly hadn't expected pushback from her own hand-picked audience. But the tide was turning. I could see it in their faces. She had gone too far, too fast. I walked out before the vote. I didn't need to witness the chaos she was about to reap. Instead, I filed my own paperwork that evening, a formal complaint to the City Board of Compliance requesting an emergency review of HOA regulatory abuse. It wasn't just about the cones anymore. It was about the culture Karen had built around fear and power and fake citations. I included evidence, witness statements, and a recommendation to suspend the HOA's authority pending investigation. I even included her PDF, complete with my sarcastic red pen note. It was both thorough and satisfying. 2 days later, my phone buzzed. It was my assistant Sheila again, laughing so hard she had to put the call on speaker. "You're gonna love this," she said. "Karen tried to register Eagle Enforcement as an official city contractor, 3 days after you filed your complaint. She actually submitted her own HOA logo as a city permit seal." I couldn't stop laughing. It was like watching someone dig a hole to bury themselves and asking for a bigger shovel. Sheila continued, "Legals in stitches. They want to fast-track the hearing. They've never seen someone hand-deliver so much evidence against themselves." The hearing was scheduled for the following week, but that didn't stop Karen from staging one final act of resistance. She went door to door with a printed flyer titled "Take Back Our Streets," filled with over-the-top language about restoring neighborhood dignity, protecting home values, and fighting government overreach. She even accused me of impersonating a city official, despite the fact that my face was on the city website next to a link titled "Contact the Director." It was desperate, sad, and almost comedic. Almost. But the neighborhood wasn't laughing anymore. Word had spread. Cars that used to avoid parking in front of homes now lined the streets proudly. People left their garage doors open without fear. And one by one, they stopped answering Karen's texts, stopped attending her events, and stopped buying her fantasy that she was in charge. Her cone barricades disappeared overnight. Her inbox was flooded with resignation calls. And me? I sat back, watched it all unfold, and prepared for the real storm to come. Because if Karen thought cones and phony citations were power, she was about to learn what actual authority looked like. And I hadn't even started yet. The third time Karen tried to tow my car, she didn't know I was already 2 steps ahead. She hadn't learned her lesson, not really. Even with a city investigation breathing down her neck and the neighborhood turning against her, Karen wasn't wired to back off. She had the persistence of a raccoon and the ego of a small-town monarch. And now, she had made it personal. The difference this time was that I was ready. I had moved beyond surveillance. I wasn't just gathering proof. I was baiting her, drawing her out, setting a trap so perfect she wouldn't even realize she'd sprung it until the cuffs were nearly on. And this time, I wouldn't be the only one watching. The second tow attempt had ended with Karen retreating indoors, red-faced and furious, after a municipal officer told her she had no authority to block or remove cars from private property. But the woman was shameless. I suspected she was already preparing a workaround, so I parked my second city vehicle, fully marked, fully documented, halfway on the curb just to see how she'd react. The spot was completely legal. Still, I caught her circling it that evening with a measuring tape, scribbling in a tiny notepad like she was conducting a NASA mission. I didn't interfere. I wanted her to feel bold. I wanted her to try again. She didn't disappoint. By Thursday morning, the cones were back. So was the tow truck. But this time, instead of slinking around like some rogue outfit, Eagle Enforcement rolled in with visible uniforms, fresh paint on the truck, and a laminated authorization sign. I could almost admire the audacity. They had tried to go legit overnight, probably thinking that cosmetic changes would protect them. What they didn't know was that every inch of that truck was being recorded by 2 hidden cameras across the street, one body cam worn by an undercover city compliance officer standing nearby, and a drone I'd borrowed from the tech department quietly circling above. They hoisted my car onto the flatbed just as I stepped out of the house, coffee in hand. Karen appeared moments later, arms crossed, eyes smug, watching from her porch like she was presiding over a royal execution. She didn't say a word this time. She thought silence made her look official. But the minute the tow truck pulled away, the unmarked SUV parked down the street lit up. Blue lights flashed. Sirens chirped. The undercover officer I had placed nearby approached the driver and asked for his tow license and route manifest. The driver stuttered, then fumbled through a glove box full of crumpled forms and blank invoices. No manifest. No legal authority. No permit for a city vehicle tow. It was a goldmine. Back on Karen's porch, the expression on her face transformed from smug pride to stiff confusion. She watched the scene unfold as more enforcement vehicles rolled in. It wasn't just parking compliance anymore. Now it was licensing and zoning, public safety, and even the city's fraud investigator who had taken an interest in how this unregistered towing company kept popping up wherever Karen needed muscle. I stepped off the curb, strolled across the lawn, and stopped in front of her. She tried to play innocent. "This has nothing to do with me," she said, arms folding tighter. "Except that the authorization form for that tow has your signature on it," I said. "And the vehicle they took was parked legally." Again. She opened her mouth, then shut it. There was nothing left to say. Behind her, several neighbors had stepped out to witness the growing spectacle. One of them was Mr. Penrose, the quiet, elderly man who lived 2 houses down. He was holding his phone up and filming, smiling faintly. Karen gave him a furious glare, but he didn't flinch. It was as if the whole street had been waiting for her mask to slip completely. The tow truck was impounded. The driver was cited for multiple violations. But the real blow came when we got the call from City Legal later that day. They had compiled all the complaints, footage, audio logs, and witness statements into a single case file over 200 pages thick. And tucked inside that case file was the key to dismantling this entire operation: the contract between Karen and Eagle Enforcement. It wasn't just shady. It was damning. The document showed recurring payments from the HOA fund to Eagle Enforcement for nuisance abatement services, with bonus incentives for repeat offenders. Worse, Karen had authorized those payments without board approval. No votes, no recorded meetings, no minute. It was embezzlement disguised as community enforcement, and it was all traceable back to her. Her digital signature, her emails, even her voice in a recorded call with the tow company owner, saying, "If they can't respect the view from my window, then their car shouldn't be in it." I took the full file to the city attorney's office myself. Within hours, they drafted an emergency order halting all towing operations in our HOA until further review. A formal audit was scheduled for the following week, and Karen was summoned to appear at a hearing before the Neighborhood Affairs Board. She still hadn't been charged with a crime, but she was teetering on the edge. And somehow, she still didn't get it. The next day, she called a private HOA meeting and tried to paint herself as the victim of government overreach. She even accused me of orchestrating a vendetta because I'd lost control of the neighborhood. Her speech was a masterpiece of delusion. She stood in the clubhouse surrounded by her dwindling supporters, most of them looking more tired than loyal, and declared that I was trying to destroy the integrity of the community with weaponized bureaucracy. She talked about how her grandfather built this town with his bare hands, how HOA presidents used to be respected, and how a few parked cars and some paperwork shouldn't outweigh the vision of a strong leader. By then, even the diehards were shifting uncomfortably in their seat. Then came the twist Karen hadn't expected. At the end of the meeting, Mr. Penrose, the quiet man who never spoke at gatherings, stood up and cleared his throat. Everyone turned. He pulled a manila envelope from his coat and placed it on the center table. "For the record," he said, "I am a retired federal judge. I've been documenting these events, and I've already submitted an independent report to the city and the State Board of HOA Governance. What you're doing, Karen, isn't just unethical. It's illegal." Karen froze like someone had pulled the plug on her. A retired judge, living on her street, watching everything, filming, taking notes. Her eyes darted between the neighbors, searching for someone to defend her. No one did. Penrose sat down quietly, like nothing had happened. The silence that followed was long and heavy. Karen didn't say another word. She left the clubhouse without even gathering her papers. Back home, I sat on my porch and watched the street. The cones were gone again. The tow truck hadn't returned. The air felt lighter, like the whole block had exhaled at once. But I knew this wasn't over. Karen wasn't the kind of person to walk away gracefully. She was wounded now, and wounded egos don't disappear quietly. They plot. They scheme. And sometimes they self-destruct. The good news? Every move she made now was under a microscope, and I had the lens focused and ready. The week following the meeting felt like the eye of a hurricane. There was no tow truck, no pink flyers, no cones. Karen had gone completely silent. Her once daily email blasts stopped. Her porch, usually buzzing with nervous board members, was eerily still. Some neighbors assumed it was over, that she'd been scared into submission. But I knew better. Karen wasn't someone who surrendered. She was the kind who retreated, regrouped, and came back swinging twice as hard and half as legally. The only question was what she'd try next and how messy it would be. She had burned every bridge in the neighborhood, had her shady towing operation exposed, and was now facing multiple investigations. A rational person would step down. Karen, however, was not rational. She was a cornered queen without a throne, and those are the ones you have to watch the closest. Then, on Monday morning, her counterattack began. Not with legal action or even another tow truck. It started with plastic. Hundreds of plastic flamingos, pink, garish, shiny in the morning sun. They weren't on her lawn. They were on mine. Dozens of them, planted in formation like a candy-colored battalion, surrounding my driveway, sidewalk, and even the rose bush in front of my porch. At first, I blinked in disbelief. Then I noticed the laminated sign taped to one of their necks. Per HOA Amendment 4.1, visual complaints must be addressed within 72 hours or display a marker of shame. It was ridiculous, passive-aggressive, and laugh-out-loud childish. And I had to admit it was on brand. Neighbors came out in their robes and coffee mugs, staring, murmuring, even chuckling a little. I didn't touch the flamingos. I took pictures. Then I walked next door and rang Karen's bell. She didn't answer. I knocked again, harder this time. Still nothing. I turned to walk away and nearly ran into her hidden camera poking through the hedges. She was watching. She wanted to see my reaction. Probably hoped I'd throw a tantrum, maybe even rip one of the flamingos out and curse her name. But I wasn't going to give her that. Instead, I walked back inside, called the city's nuisance response team, and filed a formal neighborhood decor violation complaint, using her own rulebook against her. Within hours, a city truck arrived and began carefully removing the flamingos, documenting each one, and citing her for unauthorized decorative obstruction. She came out screaming when they took the last one, demanding to see a permit, calling them fascists in fluorescent vests. They didn't even blink. The next day, she escalated again. This time, she mailed letters to every resident, claiming she was being targeted by a rogue city official with a personal vendetta. She framed herself as a whistleblower, claimed I had misused government resources to retaliate against her 4 community beautification efforts, and demanded my resignation from city service. The letter was packed with half-truths and outright fabrications, including a claim that I had once parked a rusted boat on my lawn for 3 months straight. That boat belonged to my neighbor's cousin during hurricane season, and Karen herself had signed off on the temporary permit. It was desperation, pure and simple, flailing in the form of printed nonsense. I should have ignored it. I really should have. But then she made it personal again. She forged a document, an actual, fabricated city memo with a fake city seal, my name at the bottom, and language stating that Karen Whitaker had been cleared of all wrongdoing and was fully authorized to resume all HOA enforcement activities. She printed copies and taped them to neighborhood lampposts. One of my co-workers spotted it on his jog and immediately sent me a picture. That was the final line. I took the evidence straight to the city attorney's office. And this time, they didn't just open a new case file. They moved to expedite legal action. That Friday, a municipal judge signed off on a warrant to inspect and seize all unauthorized HOA enforcement documents, property, and signage. Early Saturday morning, city workers arrived in official vehicles, escorted by legal representatives, and began what would come to be known on the block as Operation Cone Collapse. The name wasn't mine. It came from a neighbor who live-tweeted the whole thing, but I adopted it with pride. The workers removed every illegal sign, flyer, cone, marker, and mailbox sticker Karen had put up in the last 3 months. They cataloged her laminated notices, impounded her HOA-issued ticket book, and even took her banner that read, "Keeping our community clean starts with you." When they approached her home, Karen burst through the front door, shrieking that this was an unlawful raid and that she would be suing the city for harassment. She tried to physically block the workers from entering her shed, where most of the signage and unauthorized documents were stored. When they informed her that she was interfering with a lawful warrant, she finally backed down, but only after getting in every worker's face and filming with her phone as if that would stop anything. The shed was opened and revealed more than anyone expected. Not just signs. Not just cones. Boxes of receipts, towing logs, HOA member files, and even a whiteboard with target list written across the top. My name was first. Jenna, the single mom, was second. A red X was drawn next to her name. Karen had been orchestrating this like a military campaign. The city took it all. Everything. And then they delivered the real blow, a formal city audit of the HOA's finances, authorized by the Neighborhood Oversight Division. Karen had been using HOA funds for personal expenses under the label of community maintenance. Dry cleaning, car detailing, a spa visit listed as stress recovery therapy. All of it paid for by resident dues. She was done. But the city wasn't finished yet. At the request of the Department of Licensing and Standards, Eagle Enforcement was issued a cease and desist letter and ordered to attend a hearing before the Business Review Board. The owner, Karen's cousin by marriage, failed to appear. In his absence, his business license was suspended, his vehicle registration revoked, and his business declared non-compliant with municipal law. All his company's equipment was seized. When Karen tried to call him during the audit and demand he show up to defend her, he hung up on her in front of 3 witnesses. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees and the last city truck pulled away, a spontaneous block gathering formed outside. People brought lawn chairs, drinks, even a Bluetooth speaker playing soft jazz as a joke. Someone brought cupcakes with little pink flamingos on top. And though no one said her name directly, the message was clear. Karen had finally lost control. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Watching neighbors finally breathe easy, talk freely, and laugh without looking over their shoulders was more than enough. A young couple I'd never met brought their toddler over to thank me for fixing the madness. One man said his blood pressure had dropped since the cones disappeared. And for the first time in months, the street felt like a neighborhood again. Karen didn't show her face that night. Her windows stayed shut, her porch lights off. I imagined her pacing back and forth, muttering legal jargon she'd misquoted from a daytime courtroom show, still trying to convince herself this wasn't over. But it was. At least, her chapter in this story was. The hearings were set. The evidence was airtight. Her allies were gone. And soon, all that would remain of Karen's HOA reign would be a folder in the city archive marked closed case. Whitaker HOA abuse, and a neighborhood full of people who would never forget the summer they lived under cone lockdown. By the time Karen finally emerged from her house, she looked nothing like the immaculately dressed, clipboard-wielding HOA queen she had once portrayed. Her hair was unkempt, her trademark oversized sunglasses missing, and the smug smile she used to wear like armor had completely vanished. But despite everything, the raids, the seized documents, the Flamingo fiasco, and the neighborhood's complete rejection, she wasn't done. At least not in her own mind. It was the day of the community block party, an event that had been rescheduled after the original had been derailed by one of Karen's notorious citations claiming sound pollution risk. This time, the entire street was in full celebration mode. Banners were strung between light poles. Children zipped through sprinklers. Music poured from every corner. And there, in the middle of it all, sat the freshly washed city-issued sedan she had once towed illegally, parked right in front of her house. She came out around noon, holding what looked like a speech. She stood at the top of her porch steps and tapped a microphone she must have pulled from storage. A cheap speaker next to her screeched to life with feedback. Conversations quieted, but only out of curiosity, not respect. She began with a tone that tried to sound composed but came off brittle. She said she wanted to address the misunderstanding and reaffirm her love for the community. She then launched into a rambling monologue about vision, lawlessness, and her belief that communities fall apart when one voice drowns out others. People tried to be polite at first, but the minute she mentioned her unjust targeting by politically motivated city staff, someone turned their music back up. A kid yelled out, "You tried to tow my mom," and everyone laughed. She kept going, as if sheer volume could will her words into meaning. But the message wasn't landing. It was crashing, publicly, in front of the very people she once tried to fine for mismatched mailboxes. I stood near the food truck line, arms crossed, listening. I could have stepped in. I could have silenced her with facts, cited every statute she broke, reminded everyone of the documents she forged and the false accusations she made. But I didn't need to. She was unraveling without help. That was the thing about people like Karen. Given enough time and attention, they'd build their own gallows and ask for the spotlight while they stood on it. Her final plea came when she asked to be reinstated temporarily as HOA president while the city's review sorted itself out. The silence that followed her request was deafening. Then, slowly, someone began clapping. Not for her, but sarcastically. It spread. It turned into a slow, mocking round of applause. And then, as if on cue, a man in the crowd rolled forward a miniature float. My idea, brought to life by a neighbor with a sense of humor and a talent for crafts. It was a small wagon styled to look like a tow truck, carrying a papier-mâché Karen with sunglasses, clipboard, and all. A cardboard sign hung from the side of the float, "Neighborhood Hall of Shame." The float circled once, stopped in front of her porch, and the man towing it, our friendly mailman who had been cited for footwear unsightly to the community, smiled and waved. Karen's face turned the color of her flamingos. Her mouth moved, but no words came out. Then she turned and fled back inside, slamming the door behind her. Later that week, the official verdict arrived. The city's Department of Neighborhood Compliance ruled to strip the HOA of its enforcement privileges for a minimum of 18 months. A third-party management company would oversee all operations during that period. Karen, specifically, was banned from holding any HOA office or leadership role indefinitely. Additionally, the HOA was fined for its role in illegal tows, misappropriation of funds, and document fraud. Karen was referred to the district attorney for criminal review regarding the forged city memo and falsified payment authorizations. The report was made public and shared online. It went viral in the local subreddit within hours, especially the part where she had labeled a neighbor's Prius as a vehicle of chaos. Someone even made a parody TikTok reenacting her infamous porch speech, complete with flamingo prop. What followed was almost poetic. Karen's husband, who had largely stayed silent through all of this, quietly listed their house for sale. The price was suspiciously below market value. Within a month, a new family moved in, a pair of teachers with 3 kids and 2 golden retrievers. They planted sunflowers. They waved at everyone. They parked a dented blue van in the same spot Karen once tried to tow me from. And no one cared. No one measured the shadows it cast or checked to see if it was aesthetically harmonious. It was just a van. On a driveway. In a neighborhood that was finally free to breathe. As for me, I was promoted 3 months later. A new city initiative on HOA oversight was launched, and I was placed in charge of the regulatory framework. We streamlined complaint processing, created a transparency portal, and made it mandatory for all HOA enforcement actions to be filed digitally with time-stamped approvals. Karen became the face of the problem we were fixing. Without even meaning to, she helped push through a policy overhaul that would protect thousands of homeowners from future overreach. The irony was not lost on anyone. One morning, months later, I received a letter. It had no return address, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Karen. The letter wasn't angry. It wasn't apologetic either. It read more like a strange mixture of bitterness and denial. She accused me of destroying her legacy, of turning her neighbors against her, and of turning what she called a small misunderstanding into a citywide witch hunt. She closed with a single line that made me laugh out loud. "I hope you're happy, Marcus. You got your car back." I tossed the letter in the recycling bin. I didn't need a trophy. I already had the best reward of all, peace and quiet. On weekends, I'd sit on my porch with a coffee, nodding at neighbors as they walked by, no cones, no fake tickets, no flamingos in sight. Jenna now led a neighborhood committee focused on community events, and Mr. Penrose ran a monthly newsletter filled with legal tips and HOA updates. We even held a car show in the cul-de-sac for fun, just to celebrate our freedom from Karen's war on visible vehicles. The highlight was a beat-up pickup truck with a fake boot attached and a license plate that read HOA Who. And sometimes, just sometimes, I'd catch a new neighbor walking by, asking someone what had happened to the lady who used to run things around here. The answer was always the same, passed on with a smile and a chuckle. She picked the wrong car to tow.